Hello everyone. So in this video, we're going to talk about another very, very important concept in Heraclitus, which is that of harmony of opposites, which comes from strife. So Heraclitus very famously sort of believed that any harmony within itself contains sort of opposite elements. You will have harmony only when there is strife, only when there is opposition. So he has this famous saying, which I think Heidegger made much of, where he says, I think this is fragment 53, where he says, war, which is polemos, so war is father of all and king of all. And some he has shown as gods and others men. Some he has made slaves, others free, right? So that the whole world is, it gets its sort of cosmos, its order. And really he's talking here about rank, so we can go back to this idea of, anti-democratic. But this idea of rank, and how does it come about? It comes through war, it comes through polemos. He's also historicizing it. It's very interesting. It's not something that comes, automatically. It's not, you're born this way. Rather, war, polemos, which is a father of all, which has made some people this and some people that, right? He says, one must realize that war is shared and conflict is justice. And justice understood as balance, how does it give us order, decay, right? And how do we have any kind of like system of rank and order in this world? So it comes from conflict and it comes from war, which is shared. And that all things comes to pass and are ordained in accordance with conflict, right? Conflict is the thing that gives rise to the world order, really. And then we have a testimonia by Aristotle, where he says about Heraclitus saying about Homer, that Homer was wrong when he said, would that conflict might vanish from amongst gods and men, which is from Iliad book 18. Right, so Homer was wrong when he said that would that conflict vanish from amongst gods and men, for there would be no attunement without high and low notes, nor any animals without male and female, both of which are opposites. So the fact that you have any kind of tuning, any kind of music really, is because you have opposing notes, you have like different notes. And that you have reproduction because you have different genders and sexes, right, which are opposites, as he understands it. So that's why he says that, conflict is in that sense a good thing. Because it is what sort of is the common condition. Things come to be because of conflict. It is a father and king of all. Remember, polemos is the father and king of all. He also has this idea that of opposites in the sense of comparatives, in the sense of it is by disease, he says, that health is pleasant, and it is by evil that God is pleasant, by hunger, satiety. Good is pleasant, and by weariness, rest, right? So you have this idea that it's only when you have disease that you will care about health, only when you have evil that you will care about good, and only when you have hunger that you'll care about satiety. So again, this idea of comparatives, right? When he's talking about this, these opposites, in fact, one of the very interesting ones, like the one that I would like to also summarize with before we go into details, so summary before details, is one where he talks about something called synopsis, right? Which can mean something like seizing, catching hold of, combination. But one of the understanding would be to grasp something, to comprehend something. So he says about that, and it's a beautiful sort of phrase when he says, wholes and not wholes, convergent, divergent, consonant, dissonant, from all things one and from one thing all. Yeah. So this idea of, to understand, to grasp, you have from all things one, from one things all, which are whole and not whole, convergent and divergent, and consonant and dissonant, right? So anything that you have, any kind of joining that you have, these joinings, these joints, these comprehensions are, for them to be in agreement is to differ, one of the translations says, to be concordant is to be discordant, and from many things come one, and from one thing come many things, and you can understand why by reading this, somebody like Lenin said, very good description of dialectical materialism, because this is pretty much what later idea of dialectics sort of was with Hegel at least, where he says that it's in contradiction that anything holds. And you can see the influence of Heraclitus on Hegel. So he has this idea that any harmony that you find between contrasting elements sort of necessarily always involves some kind of tension, some kind of strife. So we saw with the war fragments where it is a strife in the sense of human strife, war. But also, there is natural strife, which you will find. And this tension is never resolved. Resolution of the tension is destruction of everything, in fact. That's what he would say. And in the world, there's always going to be, any kind of harmony or peace that you find is because of internal conflict, internal tension that is in there. And the cessation of this tension, the cessation of this struggle will be the disintegration of the cosmos. The cosmos is cosmos, it is ordered, it is structured because there is tension, right? He has this fragment, this tiny fragment where he says, it rests by changing, right? It remains like fixed by changing. And we'll talk about that also when we talk about the flux fragments. But this idea of resting by changing. So what is this principle of opposites that we have been talking about? So basically the idea is that everything is made of opposites. Everything is made of contradictory, tense, strife-making elements, right? And so there's always this internal tension between everything. And these opposites, they are sort of identical in force. That's how they hold, because otherwise, let's say one takes over the other, then like with Anaximander's universe, you would have. But in Anaximander's universe, it was slightly different. Here, like it is holding together because of this very tense balance that has been created, and then. War, as we said, is a ruling force. So let's look at some of the metaphors. One of the metaphors, we've already talked about war, which is not exactly a metaphor almost, it's an explanation. But one of the metaphors he uses is that of a bow, like a bow and arrow bow, or a lyre, like a musical instrument with strings. So he says, they do not comprehend how a thing agrees at variance with itself. It is an attunement turning back to itself, like that of the bow and the lyre, right? So the idea of the attunement of the bow is because it is at variance with itself. There are concordant and discordant tones. And also this idea that, if you think about it, there are opposite forces pulling. How do you have a tuned lyre or a tuned bow, like this bow? Is tense, right? So you can think of that bow and you can think of the wood that it's sort of composed of, and both of them are in perfect tension. If the bow breaks, if the string breaks, the whole bow would break. If the wood breaks, then the whole bow would break. So you have this idea of this tension that is holding it. Same with a musical instrument. It is tuned because all the strings are in tension. So if the tension sort of breaks, then it will not play anything. Or if the wood breaks, like let's say you're playing a guitar, if the wood breaks, then again it won't play anything. So you have the idea that they're in perfect tension with each other. Yeah. So he says, the one that I already quoted earlier, where he says, opposition brings concord, and from tones at variance comes perfect attunement, and all things come to pass through conflict. Right. So this idea again of where do you get concord from? From opposition. And because you have these different tones at variance, that's how you have, music in the first place, right? And the other one that we had, like when we talked about like nature in the very beginning, he says hidden attunement is better than the obvious one. So again, this metaphor of the bow, of, attunement in the bow. My favorite, which is this pun where he says, the name of the bow is life, its work is death. Now this pun is a Greek pun, of course, where the old word for bow in Homer's time was bios. And the word for life is also bios. So basically he's playing on that, saying that what is the bow used for? Bow and arrow, to shoot and to kill, right? So its name of it is life, because that's bios means life, but its work is death. Anyway, as I said, he likes to pun, and there's just one of them amongst many. So you have this idea that you have forces pulling both ways, and that any apparent harmony that you see, a rest or peace that you see. So you see this musical instrument lying in the corner at rest, nothing wrong with it. It is in a state of precarious equilibrium, really. There is this precarious equilibrium between these forces that are pulling it in two different directions. So you have the strings and the wood, both pulling in different directions. And if one of them wins, then the whole thing will break. The cosmos will break. Yeah. And so any static object that we find is in fact in a continuous tug of war, inside. This is a hidden sort of, tug of war that's going inside, which is not evident. And it will become evident, let's say, if the string is not strong enough. Yeah. If there is an inequality in the opposite tensions, then it will break. So in Anaximander's terms, you could say that, one of the sides will take advantage. And then, but unlike Anaximander, you don't have this necessary idea of retribution, but maybe it's there, right? And the whole thing will straighten itself, and that will show that there had been this tension all this while, right? So this harmonia, we talked about this harmonia with the Pythagoreans as well, this harmony, this joining, right, is a dynamic one for Heraclitus. It's a dynamic harmony, not like a mathematical sort of single harmony. It's a dynamic harmony. And this dynamism comes from these opposite motions, these vigorous motions, which is neutralized in this precarious equilibrium. But the motion is there, it's there, and then it'll break. It might break, yeah, if one of them sort of gets slightly stronger than the other. In fact, one of his fragments says, even this, the word he uses is koukeon, right, which is this potion, which is a mixture of barley, cheese, and wine, right? So this barley, cheese, and wine potion, which he says, separates until it is stirred. So it only maintains its consistency of being this koukeon, this potion, if it is being constantly stirred. As soon as you stop stirring, things will separate out. Yeah, and break apart. So it sort of maintains this harmony by being in dynamic motion. Yeah. So that's one of the notions of this harmony, which comes via tension, and this idea that that equilibrium can only be held with some tension that is acting away in the background. Now, this other metaphor that he uses is that of day and night, of the way up and the way down, straight, crooked. So I'll read out these fragments where he says, the way up and the way down are one and the same. Now, what does that mean? I mean, it sounds like a very obvious thing, but let's say you say this road is going downwards. But this road is also going upwards. It is going downwards because it is going upwards. So any kind of idea that you have of the road, let's say the road going downwards, is because the road is going upwards. The way up and the way down are one and the same. Yeah. Then you have the path of the carding wheels is straight and crooked, right? So this path is both straight because, with the wheels you're going straight, but it's also a crooked path. It's not a straight path, right? So you have this path which is both straight and crooked, and straight because it is crooked, and it's crooked because it's straight. Then the one we talked about earlier where he criticizes Hesiod, that he, lots of people think that he knows a lot of things, but he doesn't understand the basic fact that the day and the night are one. What is day is night, and what is night is day. And in fact, you will know the day because there is night, and you know the night because there is day, right? And then another one where he says, for God, all things are good and just, but men have taken some things as unjust and some as just. So again, this idea of, well, here it's more of an idea of comparatives. But this same sort of idea of the day, night, the road up and down, the straight, crooked, the just, unjust, the good, bad that we looked at earlier, right? So you have this idea that two apparently contradictory things, or, like, ideas are essentially the same. Yeah, that the idea that there is an essential unity to phenomena, which we talked about a lot when we talked about logos, but the idea that it's one logos, even though things have opposite sort of tensions in there. And the idea also of reciprocal succession and change, right? So when we talk about day night or summer winter or cold hot, like the idea that there is a reciprocal succession, but it's still the same. The succession comes, the order, the cosmos comes because there is change in there. Then also this idea of, that opposites are appreciated in sort of a relation to opposites, that good is appreciated in relation to bad, that just is appreciated in relation to unjust, that health in relation to disease. So as I said, like the fragment 111 where he says, it is disease that makes health sweet and good, and it is hunger that makes sort of, satiety sort of nice, and weariness, rest, right? So that's what sort of good and bad come from this comparison that we have. He has also other fragments where, it's also a question of relativity of the experiencing subject, right? So I, as this person, might think that this is good, but somebody else, would have thought that the same thing is bad. So he says things like, asses prefer garbage to gold. So if you're an ass, I mean a donkey that is, if I give you gold, what will you do with it? But garbage can be of some use. Or one that says, swine delight in mire more than clean water, chickens bathe in dust, right? Now, if you are swine, then you will want to, why would you want to go to clean water? Well, maybe you would, I don't know. I don't know much about swine. But I personally would not, right? So there is a difference between some would prefer to have like not clean water, and some would prefer to have clean water. So again, there's a relativity of the experiencing subject. The clearest one here would be this one, where he says, the sea is the purest and foulest water. It is pure water, it is also foul water, right? For fish, drinkable and life-sustaining. For humans, undrinkable and deadly, right? So seawater, salty water, is good for fish, but it's not good for us humans, yeah? Then you also have, other comparisons where he says things like the most beautiful of apes is ugly in comparison with the race of men, and the wisest of men seem ape in comparison to a god. So again, this comparison in this sense of here, there's a more of a hierarchy that he's bringing forward. Another one where he brings this hierarchy is when he says, a man is foolish, found foolish by a god as a child by a man. So again, this, this idea of comparison. So there's an idea of relativity, there's an idea of comparison, then an idea of reciprocity and reciprocal succession and change. Then the idea of this idea that opposites are different aspects of the same thing. So the road up and the road down is one and the same. Just and unjust in some fragments, it sounds like they're the same, right? So the idea that there is tension, but there will be an essential unity to phenomena. And then, what we talked about in the beginning, this idea of conflict, that universal conflict which constitutes the universe, right? That polemos, war, is the father of all, king of all, right? That war is common, justice is strife, kind of a thing. And then what place, how do they hold together? It's basically logos, right? So logos is the law of all, right? Logos is what is held in common. And so it is a law of, in that sense, of simultaneous opposing tensions, right? Logos, then, is not a fixed law. It's a law which holds the dynamic in it, right? There's a dynamic which is held together by the logos. And so, in fact, what Heraclitus here is then doing is that he is actually rebelling against this idea of this peaceful, harmonious world. First of all, he's saying it is not peaceful or harmonious. What you think of as peaceful and harmonious has this hidden strife in it, this hidden tension in it, which might break at any time. There's this chance of it just being completely destroyed. And so when you think of Pythagoras, for example, where he talks about harmony and rest and contentment and peace, he's just like, nope, right? Or Anaximander, where he says, the warfare of opposites is injustice and it needs retribution, and that's what creates the cosmos, and so the new cosmos will come out, but it is unjust. He will say, no, war is just, right? Justice is strife. So he says, this fragment or testimonia where he says, rest and quiet, leave them to the dead where they belong, right? I don't want it. I don't want any of it. So again, this idea of harmony of opposites, and opposites constituting the truth, the true sort of structure of the universe, this contradiction. Everything is composed of contradiction. Contradiction is like, we could make a modern version of it. Polemos is the father of all. Contradiction is the father of all, right? So and this contradiction is the logos. Logos is contradiction in that sense. Yeah.